Hi, this is Joe Green, head pastor of St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, also the founder of the 2019 movement, and I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. I want to talk a little bit today about Governor Andrew Cuomo and this scandal that's happening, but more importantly, I want to talk about this idea of a great distraction, and I'm going to tell you why this is a distraction. For those of you who are not familiar with the controversy, Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York. First, he came under fire for how he handled. Well, let's say first of all, he was applauded because of his handling of the pandemic, and people talked about what a great leader he was and what great leadership he was demonstrating. But primarily, the people that was talking about when the media was talking about what great leadership he had and all those things, it was doing it in contrast to President Trump. Because they hated President Trump. The media was overwhelmingly anti-Trump, and because they were anti-Trump, and Cuomo and Trump was kind of going at it, that they took the side of Cuomo and they lauded him for such great leadership, and et cetera, et cetera. But of course, afterwards, the controversy came out when it was found out that he really didn't do a great job of managing the pandemic, and even covered up the fact that they had a huge amount of elderly people that died in nursing homes, right? And just to put in perspective, I live in Pennsylvania, and similar thing happened, that they would actually take sick people and put them in the nursing homes who were COVID positive. And of course, we know that the elderly people are the most vulnerable to the disease, to sickness and disease. And what they did was they covered up the numbers, right? They fudged the numbers to make it look like it wasn't as bad as it was. And I'll give you some details about the numbers, but I just want to say, first and foremost, as I start this, that this was right now, what is happening is damage control. So recently, up to 5 different women came out and said that Governor Cuomo dealt with them inappropriately. So touching inappropriately, making them feel uncomfortable. There was no real bad, accusations. Like, they didn't accuse him of raping them or anything like that. They all accused him of being inappropriate. Like, he held the one's hand and, held her close and tried to kiss one or something like that. These things, and I'm not belittling it if the women felt uncomfortable, but it wasn't to the level of he's not accused of rape or anything. Right. So, but the reason I say that this is an distraction, because these people, these women who are talking, most of them had worked with him probably, a few years ago, or these occurrences happened a little while back, but they're just now coming to the surface. And it's no coincidence that these things are happening when they are, because one of the strategies that happens is through damage control or through propaganda. It's like when a bad thing happens, they'll show you something over here to distract you and get your attention off of this really terrible thing that happened. It would be almost like, on your body. If you had pain somewhere in your body and you hurt yourself somewhere else, to take away the the thought of this particular pain over here or this particular occurrence. It's like a sleight of hand. And so what happens is they are bringing this to the surface. So now everybody's talking about these women that are coming against him and accusing him of inappropriate behavior. Inappropriate behavior could be a lot of different things, and it's kind of minor. It's not really something that will just be insurmountable for him to overcome. And he's even coming, he was so. He got on the news and he said, well, I apologize if I did anything to embarrass anyone or make anybody feel uncomfortable, because these are things that they're subjective, right? They're a matter of opinion. So one person has some actions the other person deems as inappropriate, but it's kind of a gray area, right? But when you think about it from the perspective of what he was originally accused of, is not only poor management of the pandemic and causing the deaths of a lot of elderly and vulnerable people, but covering it up. And so let me give you some of the stats. New York State, this is from one of the New York publications. New York State finally released fatality data for individual nursing homes, painting a much grimmer picture of the toll taken by the CV-19 virus. The State Department of Health quietly updated its chart of nursing home deaths to include those who died at hospitals as well as in the facilities. The 4,067 hospital deaths had previously been included in the overall state tally. The total number of nursing home patients who died from the CV is now 13,163, with nearly one third dying in a hospital. And so what they did was they had someone in the nursing home. They took them to a hospital. They died in the hospital, but they they didn't count them as being coming from the nursing home. Also, when you look at how they said sickly people were actually taken into hospitals as well. But anyway, they fudged the numbers. They made it look like it wasn't as bad as it actually was. And this one says that the Upper East Side Rehabilitation and Nursing Center had 29 deaths at the home and another 51 in the hospital. So instead of reporting the 29 plus 51, so what is that? That's 30, 80. So instead of reporting they had 80 deaths, they would have reported most likely that they only had 29 deaths, right? Which makes it look a lot less, it's not as bad as if you said 80 deaths versus 29 deaths. It's a way of kind of making things look not as bad as it really was. Information for the Bronx Care Special Care Center had previously shown only 8 CV deaths, but there were 20 additional deaths in the hospital, according to the data. So the Bronx Care Special Care Center said they only had 8 deaths, but they ignored the 20 that died in the hospital. So 28 is a lot larger than 8, right? And I'm sure these nursing homes are probably not huge facilities necessarily. And so when you think about it, it really is, again, that's a distraction, right? What I'm saying, the distraction is these women saying that he, approached them inappropriately. And he's saying, well, there was a misunderstanding, right? These are gray areas. But when you start talking about deaths of elderly people, especially if that was, God forbid, someone in your family that passed in these, you would want them to honestly to have reported it. So what they're doing now is they're using this to distract us. So people are talking more about the women. And now I just heard either today or yesterday, 2 more women. So it was 3 at first and then 2 more. So that's the talk, right? And what they do when they use damage control or propaganda or public relations, is what propaganda is now called. They do it in a way to soften the blow, right? Because time, a lot of times, heals wounds, right? So after time passes, then the controversy sometimes can blow over, or it's not as critical as when it first happens. When it first happens and it's a hot button issue, then it's harder for you just to blow it under the rug, sweep it under the rug. So think about this. So, we have this really bad scandal of people dying in the nursing home, but instead they're talking more about these women saying he treated them inappropriately. And most of them were people he work for him or something like that. So let's talk about propaganda very quickly. Propaganda is the spreading of ideas, information, or rumor for the purpose of helping or injuring an institution, a cause, or a person. Ideas, facts, or allegations spread deliberately to further one's cause or to damage an opposing cause. That's the definition of propaganda. Now, propaganda, for you guys who may not know, that the globalists perfected propaganda, or they've been using it for many centuries, but they perfected it in Nazi Germany with Edward Bernays, who's called the father of propaganda. The Nazis had what was called the Ministry of Propaganda, which they used to help to, first of all, villainize the Jews, right? That allowed them to victimize and do horrible things to the Jews in Germany, but also to get support for them to go to war. And so they learned to perfect propaganda as a way to sway public opinion in a way to get support for what their agenda is. Propaganda is primarily based on partial truths, half truths, and truth taken out of context. And so you can use a partial truth, a half truth, or truth taken out of context. And so when you're called to the carpet, when you're using propaganda, it's a little bit easier to say, nope, see, these are facts right here, but these facts are half truths, partial truths, or truths or facts that are taken out of context. Now, like I said, the globalists have perfected the use of propaganda to manipulate what is known as groupthink. And groupthink is the social engineering of the masses by use of entertainment or media to create consensus of thought among the masses. So groupthink is this dynamic that most human beings want to be a part of a larger group. And so what they use the media, entertainment, and other various platforms to create this idea that everybody else is thinking a certain way. So when they give you the idea that everybody else is thinking a certain way, it's easier for you to kind of fall in line than to think outside of the box, especially when you think about media, when you think about mainstream media, that everybody's giving the same message, right? When you think about entertainers, so your favorite entertainer tells you that this is the truth. And because people are moved a lot of times by emotions or likability, then they're more likely to agree with the person or believe that what the person is telling them is true. So getting back to Cuomo, like I said, it is easier for him to recover from a little inappropriate behavior with women, but it would be almost impossible for him to recover from being found guilty of sending elderly people to die or covering up the deaths of elderly people in this worldwide pandemic. Another one, let me give you another example of this. This is Harvey Weinstein, and you guys are familiar with the Harvey Weinstein case, and I believe he's still in jail or he's doing time right now. And so Harvey Weinstein, they use him as a distraction for a larger issue. I know people will say, well, how could that be? That was terrible what Harvey Weinstein was accused of. He was accused of rape, of sexual assault, and various things, sexual harassment. He was accused of a lot of by various women over the years. But here's what you have to understand is that when the Harvey Weinstein scandal hit, there was a growing number of people that were coming clean with the fact with the story that Hollywood that pedophilia is rampant in Hollywood. If you look at Corey, I think his name is Corey Haim. Corey Haim. There was a guy by the name of Copy. I can't think of his first name. And there was other people. There was a documentary that was done recently that talked about just how much pedophilia goes on in Hollywood behind the scenes, right? And we know the stories of a whole bunch of these child stars that when they got older, they admitted that they were sexually assaulted or abused. And that's why, and for many years, I used to wonder why. If you look at many of these childhood stars, once they got to a certain age, they all had drug problems, suicidal tendencies, and things like that. Those are all those all are things that happen when people are sexually assaulted as a child, or abused or raped or whatever. And so of course the information got out that pedophilia was very widespread in Hollywood, and it was gaining attention. So then you have this Harvey Weinstein scandal. And so what happened is everybody's focusing on Harvey Weinstein, and now the whole idea of pedophilia being very rampant in Hollywood, it kind of went by the wayside. You haven't heard much about it. Hollywood has been able to endure. So Hollywood was able to endure the Harvey Weinstein scandal with the idea of the casting couch environment in Hollywood, because so for instance, for many years, people knew what the casting couch meant. What the casting couch meant is that many people, especially women, if they wanted to make it in Hollywood, they'd have to sleep with somebody to get a part, right? Maybe it was the producer or the director or something like that. They would have to exchange sex for getting a role in Hollywood or making it, right? That was pretty well known for many decades in Hollywood. And so when the Harvey Weinstein scandal came up, it was easier to endure that from Hollywood. Everybody just said Harvey was a creep, but they didn't equate it to like the institutional idea that Hollywood itself was doing this. They were pointing the fingers at individual people, and plus most people didn't have as much sympathy for the women, because a lot of these women basically had this idea that they would do whatever it take to make it into Hollywood. And so they would do whatever they needed to do to get into Hollywood. And then later on, they would say, they were forced to do something, or they were raped or something. And it didn't carry as much weight. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I think it's terrible anytime someone gets abused or raped. It's horrible if somebody would have to sleep with somebody to try to make it into a certain industry. That's terrible. But at the end of the day, if you willingly go there with the intent on saying, I'll do what I need to do to make it, then it doesn't carry as much sympathy from people as thinking about pedophilia, because pedophilia is a child, an underage child, who's being taken advantage of. And that's something that Hollywood itself, it will be much more difficult for them to recover. So you have, again, this distraction, right? You have pedophilia becoming more and more, people talking about the pedophilia in Hollywood. It's reported that some very famous, likable actors, directors, or producers or executives are part of it. And, so it would be almost impossible for them to recover from that. But it's easier to recover from throwing Harvey Weinstein under the bus. So again, you had this growing number of people coming out saying that there's pedophilia in Hollywood. Then all of a sudden the Harvey Weinstein scandal comes up, and then people stop talking about the pedophilia and they're talking simply about Harvey Weinstein. Another one I want to tell you, and this is the third one I wanted to talk about, is, this whole thing that they had was separating children at the border. And that became a huge, huge scandal, right? And of course, because President Trump was such a lightning rod, it all fell on him. Like he's the worst human being in the world, because these children were being separated from their families. They showed pictures of children in cages and all these other things. But let me say to you why this was a distraction, and I'll explain to you what that was a cover up for. First of all, when it started to happen, it was happening, I think it was in 2014 or 2015. And President Obama was the one who actually put in place the laws of separating the children from their families. And so the only thing President Trump said was, we're going to have a zero tolerance. We're going to completely uphold that law, right? No exceptions. So that's why he was villainized. But people kept ignoring the fact that that was a law that was already on the books and was already happening before time. Now, and that became a huge scandal, right? So, but why was that a huge scandal? One of the main reasons why that law was enacted in the first place is because of human sex trafficking at the border. There's a huge problem with human sex trafficking at the southern border of the United States, right? And so what would happen is, a lot of these, they call them coyotes, a lot of these people were smuggling children across the border. And so because until they could identify that the child was with their relative or their biological parents, they would separate the families until they could confirm that. And so think about this for a second. If you think it was bad that children were separated from their family, think about the alternative is much worse. That if these children were actually being sex trafficked, then the fact that they were, if you let them go back to the person, that they were going to be re-victimized, that's even a worse situation than them being separated from their parents. Now, let me tell you, and this is kind of graphic, so please excuse me or bear with me. If you don't know, human sex trafficking is one of the largest criminal enterprises in the world. It's one of the largest criminal enterprises in the world. And one of the reasons why it's so profitable, of course, if you kidnap a child or kidnap someone and put them into sex trafficking, you can keep making money off of them. And again, this is graphic. I'm just telling you what I know. And, it's not easy to say this, but you have to know the truth, right? So there was a story of a young lady who got kidnapped and sold into sex trafficking. And she said that there were times where she would be forced to have sex with 20 to 30 men in a day. I'm going to say that again. She was forced to have sex with 20 to 30 men in a day. So how profitable is that? You smuggle one person, kidnap them, or you sell a person or buy a person, and whoever buys that person, now they keep making money off of them over and over again. And it's very traumatic. It's horrible. It's a horrible situation. But I say all that to say that so think about this. As much outrage as it was about the children being separated from their family and placed temporarily in cages, the alternative is much worse, right? So, and because the powers that be was kind of hiding the amount of human sex trafficking or that issue as a whole, then the shiny object over here was, look at these children in cages. This is terrible. But again, the alternative is 10 times worse, right? So that child who has to live temporarily in this facility or this holding cell, if they weren't there, they could have possibly been being pimped out over and over and over again, forced to have sex with adults. And so let me give you some other statistics about this. Now, this is from the Department of Homeland Security website. This is dated March the 6th, 2019. It says illicit materials, transnational gangs, drugs, human trafficking, sex crimes Our nation is experiencing a dire immigration crisis that requires swift and decisive action to confront illegal and uncontrolled migration threatening our safety and security. Now, again, the big focus was they're separating children at the border, but they were ignoring, because the globalists, the internationalists, if you will, the globalists, they want weakened borders. And the reason they want weakened borders is because weakened borders weakens nations, and a weakened nation now is easier to be absorbed into the one world governmental system. And so let me give you some part of this from this Department of Homeland Security website. It says in the last 2 years alone, ICE officers have arrested 266,000 aliens with criminal records, including those convicted of nearly 100,000 assaults, 30,000 sex crimes, and 4,000 homicides. That was just in a 2-year period. In Texas, 276,000 criminal aliens were booked into local jails between June 1st, 2011 and December 31st, 2018, of which over 186,000 were classified as illegal aliens by the Department of Homeland Security. Last year, ICE officers removed more than 10,000 known or suspected gang members already in the country illegally. Each week, approximately 300 Americans have died from heroin overdoses, which nearly 90% comes across the southern border. So 90% of all the heroin in the country comes across the southern border. Just last month, CBP made the largest seizure of fentanyl ever recorded, attempting to cross the southern border. It was enough to kill more than 115 million Americans. Let me read that again. This is from the Department of Homeland Security website. So it says last month, the CBP made the largest seizure of fentanyl. If you don't know what fentanyl is, it's a drug. It's a synthetic drug. It's like an opioid base, I believe, but it's a synthetic drug, and it's very deadly. And it's so deadly, as a matter of fact, that it can absorb through your skin. And there were say a police officer or someone who comes in contact with it. There was someone that actually died of overdoses simply because they touched it with their bare skin and it absorbed in their skin, and it was such a large amount that absorbed through their skin, they died. So it says that they recorded the largest seizure of fentanyl ever attempting to cross the southern border, and it was enough to kill more than 115 Americans. Alarming CBP has reported that fentanyl smuggling between ports of entry and the southern border has more than doubled over the last fiscal year. Fentanyl was responsible for more than 28,400 overdose deaths of Americans in 2017. Just a few weeks ago, CBP made its largest fentanyl bust, seizing 254 pounds hidden in a truck trailer compartment. Now, this is some more statistics. Again, so the focus was only on them separating children. Now, when the children were being separated, they were getting fed and taken care of, but they were safe, right? They weren't being trafficked or whatever. So all these other statistics are being ignored. So again, there goes that distraction piece. So here's some more statistics from the Department of Homeland Security. 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted on the journey to the border. 1 in 3 women were sexually assaulted on the journey to the border. In the fiscal year 2018, ICE made more than 1,500 human trafficking arrests, 97% of them for sex trafficking. So 1,500 human trafficking arrests just in 2018, 90% of them sex trafficking. 20,000 children were illegally smuggled into the United States during the month of December alone. That's in 2019. 20,000 children were illegally smuggled in the United States during the month of December alone. In the first 5 months of the fiscal year 2018, CBP saw a 315% increase of individuals using children to pose as family units to gain entry in the United States. Now, all these things were occurring. You didn't hear that in the news. What you did was they had you focus on the children being separated. And I know this because I got into several debates because I said it's unfortunate that these children are being separated, but there's a reason why. And the reason is that the alternative for them being separated and placed in cages, in holding cells, the alternative was 10 times worse. And the reason they would separate them until they could either identify the person they're with as a family member or parent, or B, until they could locate another family member that would come in and claim them. And when they couldn't, these children would stay in these holding cells for more period of time. But I wanted to share that with you because, again, you have to start being savvy when you look at the news. When you look at the news and understand propaganda, when you understand how they are distracting us with a whole lot of things, and when you look beyond the distraction, what they're covering up is much worse than what they're actually reporting on. So this has been Joe Green. Again, until next time, please subscribe to my channel. Please share my videos if you see any benefit to it. And until next time, peace and blessings to you. We love you.